Today, I'm going to show you 15 ways you can upgrade your LEGO Star Wars minifigures and turn them into the perfect versions. Kicking things off, we have the infamous clone troopers. These have gotten a lot of hate online over the last few years, from their printing errors, helmet holes, and missing waist capes and pauldrons. In my eyes, some of these are pretty easy to look past, but others like this Commander Fox are in desperate need of some changes. The print on the torso is so faint that it ends up having a pink hue, and the missing waist cape makes him feel super bland. So firstly, I want to give him a waist cape and help cover up the printing on his legs a little bit. For this, you can either use one of the old LEGO capes like this one from the 212th Airborne Trooper, or get a custom one like me. And slipping this on, already he feels a little bit more put together. However, I want to take it one step further. So I grabbed this custom printed body which has a white armor plate, arm printing, and no printed waist cape, and added on the official helmet and minifigure head. So now Fox is fixed and ready. Speaking of clones, the most recent Captain Rex was so close to perfection, however he came with a printed waist cape, a super long pauldron, and also uses the old school rangefinder piece. So I picked up this custom black camera to throw on him, and also got myself one of these newer rangefinder pieces that were recently featured in Jango Fett's Slave 1. His pauldron does still look a little goofy, but this is a massive upgrade and I absolutely love how he looks now. But clones aren't the only troopers who need some help, as stormtroopers have also recently had a bit of a change. However, this one is a little bit more mild. LEGO recently switched up the color of the hip joint from black to white, and since I want all of my trooper minifigures to match, I ended up getting some extra white hips in order to switch them out on all of my existing stormtroopers. And now my entire army can match one another. Taking it back a couple of years, we have Queen Armadala, who in my eyes is one of the best minifigures that LEGO have ever released. Her custom molded hair and skirt piece are incredible, especially for a figure that is over 13 years old. However, even my favorite figure can be upgraded to look even better. As a couple of years ago, LEGO made these little shoulder armor pieces that look really similar to the shoulder detailing on her red throne dress. This specific color only came in one figure, so I ended up ordering the piece online to be able to swap it in with my existing Queen Armadala figure. So now her armor looks a little bit more complete and accurate to the movie, and she is once again the crown jewel of my shelf. And whilst we're on the topic of episode 1, the next one I want to try and upgrade is our boy young Anakin. This particular minifigure came in the recent Sith Infiltrator set and has an amazing face print and shaggy hair. However, he is not exactly prepped and ready for pod racing. A printed version of Anakin's helmet came in this old pod racer set from 2011, and since the figure is only a few dollars, I picked it up and swapped out the helmet onto the newer Anakin. When I added some grey goggles, the figure comes together and gives me an alternate version to use or display, which is pretty neat. If you haven't subscribed already, you might not know that you can also use minifigures to make entirely custom characters and variants, like this rebel suit version of Zeb from season 3 of The Mandalorian. The only version of Zeb that LEGO have ever released was back in 2014 in the original LEGO Ghost. But because of the yellow color of his torso, he is known to break and snap really easily, making him one of the most expensive Rebel figures that you can find. The blue Rebel pilot body, on the other hand, is a lot easier to find and significantly cheaper since it came in 2 Rogue One sets. And then when you take the head and hands from Zeb and put them on this pilot body, you now have a custom version of Zeb from The Mandalorian ready for the new movie next year. And speaking of celebrations, for the 25th anniversary of LEGO Star Wars, LEGO included special edition minifigures into select sets. One of those figures was the long-awaited Calstus from the video game Jedi Fallen Order. He is only the second time that the game has ever been featured in LEGO, with the first being a buildable version of his droid, BD-1, which came with an adorable minifigure scale version of him. Sadly, LEGO never ended up including that piece with Calstus, but thankfully I had BD-1 lying around in my collection. With BD-1 in hand, I built up a small neck bracket using only a few elements, which allows me to attach BD-1 to the back of Calstus just like in the game. But a quick word of warning, to get one of these BD-1 figures these days will set you back about $40 US, so it is not the cheapest upgrade, but certainly worth doing because I think it looks incredible. A much cheaper upgrade, however, comes in the form of this Sabine minifigure. She came along in the recent Ahsoka's T6 shuttle along with a new skin tone, medium tan. However, in the original Rebels LEGO sets, the color didn't exist yet, so they ended up going for the basic light nougat, which I think just does not match her in the show at all. And since I wanted to make her minifigures a little bit more consistent, I ended up picking up some extra Sabine minifigures so that I could steal the heads off it and swap it out with the ones that came in the Rebel sets. And as a little bonus, I also picked up this custom body from her outfit in the later seasons, which I completed with the same head and a similar hairpiece. And with all Sabines complete, I have a nice collection of her variants from across the different shows. Another character who has multiple outfit appearances is Ahsoka, who recently got a massive upgrade to her iconic maroon outfit from the Clone Wars. LEGO upgraded her Leku and gave her the medium legs this time around to match how she looks in the show a lot closer. And whilst I think this minifigure looks absolutely absolutely fantastic on its own, I wanted to take it even further by adding on some custom arms that come complete with her armbands. And just by spending a couple of dollars, this simple switch has now made the figure absolutely perfect in my eyes. I also printed up some custom printed arms for the Anakin from that same set, and I am so happy with the result of both of them. But unlike Ahsoka, the new young Boba Fett ended up being a huge downgrade in many ways. The arm color of this new minifigure for many people looks way too light, but the bigger issue comes down to the choice in hairpiece. Boba Fett in Attack of the Clones is known for his short curly hair, and this Lego piece is the complete opposite. There's a couple of different options that you could switch to. Firstly is the hairpiece that Lego used on the older versions of this figure. However, much like the most recent piece, I think it looks far too straight. The next option is to go for the Han Solo hair, and whilst the curls look a lot closer to how they do in the movie, it is still a little bit too long at the back for Boba. The final option, and the best match in my opinion, is this curly hairpiece that was first introduced for the BTS figures. The length at the back is still a little short, however, it is a much closer match than what Lego chose for the set. But it's not just Boba Fett where Lego have neglected to use existing and more detailed pieces in their sets. As instead of using dual molded legs for both the Rebel Troopers and the Empire, Lego ended up going with plain grey pieces instead. Now for the Rebel Troopers, these dual molded legs recently came in a Gotham City art set on Catwoman, which means you can pick them up on Lego's website for just over $1. I ordered a bunch from them so that I have a stash on hand for whenever I get new Rebel Troopers or even Imperial officers, and I can swap out the plain legs for these dual molded ones instead. It's such a minor change, but in my eyes makes such a big difference on all of these minifigures. Much to everyone's surprise, Lego brought back the Slave Leia minifigure recently after over 10 years. However, because of some controversy when it comes to her outfit, Lego decided to switch things up a little bit from their previous designs and ended up giving her these dual molded legs, making her skirt look more like a pair of basketball shorts. The previous versions of the figure went with a much more realistic approach, with the skirt being printed on some completely light nougat legs. But since this newer version has an upgraded hairpiece and face print, I decided it would be fun to combine both figures together to make an absolutely perfect hybrid. I really wish that Lego went with the traditional design for her legs, but if the basketball shorts were the compromise for having her at all, I am really glad that they did it. Despite being the villain of the entire franchise, we have yet to see a Revenge of the Sith variant of Palpatine after he turns into a dried out sponge. We've seen his black robes, silver robes, red robes, and even his Rise of Skywalker zombie robes. But if you want a minifigure version of his Senate attire, you're going to need to make him yourself. Thankfully, this only requires 2 minifigures. The first being a standard black robe Palpatine, and the second being the red robe Clone Wars version from the Coruscant Guard gunship. By taking the head, hood, hands, and cape from the original trilogy minifigure and combining it with the red robes, you can make a really good hybrid that matches his appearance throughout the end of Revenge of the Sith. And just like that, you are prepped and ready to take over the galaxy. One of everyone's favorite droids is none other than C-3PO. And a few years ago, Lego made a perfect version of him complete with printed arms and a dual molded silver and gold leg. However, for years he stayed exclusive to the UCS Luke's Landspeeder and has only recently returned back in the brick-built C-3PO, making him only a tiny bit easier to get a hold of. Thankfully though, Lego recently made a keychain version of him, and despite most of the figure being glued together, you can actually still pop off the arms and legs just like any normal minifigure. So for an extra $6, you'll have yourself a perfect and upgraded version of C-3PO. But it's not just him that you can do this with, as the same can actually be done for another UCS minifigure, which is none other than Pilot Luke. This means that you can create the best version of both of these figures for only a couple of extra dollars. Finally, I'm gonna switch up the appearance of the only Lego Star Wars minifigures that have never been updated throughout the entire 26-year history of the theme. And that is none other than the classic B1 Battle Droid. And whilst Lego was able to make a pretty perfect mold straight off the back, they have never come with their backpacks or been added to the torso since. The most simple and cheap way to make a version of them is by placing a tan tile to the stud at the very back of the figure. Though, using this method means that the antennas are absent. So to add that in, instead, you can use a tan clip and one of the Harry Potter 1 pieces instead, but this still looks a little bit off. So to make them look perfect, I splashed out a little bit extra and ordered some custom Battle Droid backpacks that fit perfectly to the back of the droids. For a custom piece, the design feels very authentically Lego and blends in really well with the official parts, which I am a massive fan of. The only thing is, depending on how many Battle Droids you have, this can add up very quickly. But with the Battle Droids complete, all of my Star Wars figures are perfect and ready to return to my display. Let me know who I should upgrade next, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more. Until next time, I'll see you later.